Hi all. Today we will go to amazing Japan together, a country where traditions and respect for others permeate every detail of life. Have you ever wondered why in Japan to touch strangers is a strict taboo? Why do you practically never find garbage tramps on the streets there? Did you know that the ordinary handshake may seem unusual or even inappropriate for us? You will learn about all this and much more from our video. Chapter 1. Why Japan is a country of strict rules and respect. In Japan, even a regular walk along the street becomes a journey through the world of traditions and unwritten rules. For a foreigner, everything seems to be familiar and completely new at the same time. Bright neon signs are adjacent to silence, and lively intersections with the extraordinary politeness of people. Here, respect is manifested in the simplest things. Passing by a person, the Japanese will definitely nod or politely bow. Black is not just a gesture, they are expressed by greeting, gratitude, asking for an apology or showing respect. Moreover, the angle of inclination is a separate science. A person bows a little deeper if he wants to emphasize special politeness, and vice versa, he easily nods when he welcomes acquaintances. When foreigners come to Japan for the first time, from the first day they are striking not only unusual architecture or food, but also the way communication between people is built here. The Japanese rarely speak loudly on the street, do not like to attract unnecessary attention and always try not to interfere with others. An interesting point is an unusual attitude to personal space. Strangers do not touch each other, and even a handshake is less common than, for example, in Europe or America. Most often, instead of handshake, the Japanese still use a bow, a universal sign of friendship and respect. If the Japanese still extends his hand for handshake, then he wants to place a foreign guest to himself. The attitude to other people's space and the peace of the Japanese is really special. Even in a lively Tokyo, you can feel that people around seem to try to dissolve in the crowd so that no one to create discomfort. For guests of the country, this is especially important. An accidental impetus or a too loud voice can be accepted as impolite. In many rodokans and traditional houses, from the very first step, visits are waiting for certain behavior. Only the employee invites you to go inside, shoes are shifted at the entrance, and your personal belongings cannot be left in a special niche of the tokonoma. There is a place only for art or flowers. Even if you paid a lot of the number, the Japanese expect that you will share respect for the place with them and observe local traditions. Each such small household part is part of one huge system in which each person respects others, space, and personal boundaries. This is what makes a trip to Japan unique, bright, and completely unforgettable. Chapter 2. A ban on talking by phone in public transport. Imagine, you go into the subway car in the center of Tokyo, are among people, but you almost do not hear any sounds except the soft buzz of the train. In Japan, there are a strict rule: in no case can you speak on a mobile phone in public transport. It doesn't matter if the call is important or I just want to chat, the locals do not accept conversations on the phone either in trains, nor in buses, or in the subway. At the entrance, bright signs with a crossed image of the phone often hang. If you still answer the call, be prepared for the fact that several Japanese people politely, but persistently will show you a mistake. In especially official cases, they can even invite transport protection and ask to go out at the nearest stop. This rule took root many years ago, when mobile devices appeared everywhere. Later, based on the discrepancies between different carriers, in the metropolitan agglomeration they accepted a single standard. 18 transport companies of the region agreed to comply with the same norms. Now passengers are allowed to use the phone only in mode without sound to send messages or, for example, view the site on the internet, but not talk out loud. It is interesting that the Japanese do not particularly communicate aloud in transport among themselves. Any conversation is conducted in a whisper in the case so as not to distract others. If the conversation accidentally becomes loud, for example, the child unconsciously laughs on the move, the parents immediately apologize and try to return the atmosphere of calm. Another point: on trains and buses it is not customary to listen to music in a loudspeaker or watch a video without headphones. Any sound that can irritate others is considered a manifestation of disrespect. Even if you ride with friends, it is better to leave funny conversations before going outside or to a special place specially allotted for this. The Japanese are so serious about the rest of others that in some wagons special places are allocated where a quiet conversation is allowed by phone, but such zones are rare and almost always indicated separately. Most passengers include a soundless mode on the smartphone in advance. This has become an automatic habit of most residents of the country. This approach helps to maintain an amazingly cozy atmosphere in transport, where everyone feels safe and knows how to relax even among a large number of strangers. For a tourist, this can be a real cultural discovery. Chapter 3. Tips. Why is it forbidden to express gratitude with money when you come to Japan for the first time? I want to thank the usual Europeans for an excellent service, to leave a little money on the table or in the hands of an employee. But this is one of the most common mistakes that tourists make. In Japan, tips are perceived very ambiguously, and an attempt to pay on top of a good service can put a person in an awkward position. Historically, there was an opinion here that the work itself should be carried out for conscience, regardless of whether the employee receives additional money or not. The Japanese are proud of how carefully and efficiently do their work, even if it seems simple and routine. No wonder the word "all" appeared. This is a special kind of sincere care for all guests that accompanies you during the vacation in the country of the rising sun. People believe paying for friendliness and politeness is almost like an insult. If you still try to leave the waiter or the hotel employee a small amount, with the most friendly smile, money will be returned to you and may even be offended or think that you decided to check it. In Japan, the money is generally transmitted in a completely different way. If somewhere a gift is still possible somewhere, it is put in an envelope and must be handed with both hands, bowing slightly. Even in a taxi, the change will be returned to the last yen, and the taxi driver left on the seat will return with an apology, even if he passes through the whole city. There is a separate concept of kokuritsuke. It is sometimes compared with donations or symbolic gratitude, but there are a lot of differences from European tips. Such an envelope with a small amount can be presented if we are talking about a major event, for example, a wedding or a large family celebration, and then more often relatives or friends, and not to employees of the service sector. Therefore, in Japan, they express gratitude in a different way. Thanks to words, they worship, say arigato and try not to put others in an uncomfortable position with financial gestures. And if you want to encourage the good-natured Japanese, just sincerely smile and say warm thanks. This will not only not offend, but will also remain in your best way to start a good relationship without misunderstanding. Chapter 4. Walking in shoes in the room, the sacred border between the street and the house. In Japan, there is a very important and, at first glance, simple rule: at the entrance to the house or to some public places they must take off shoes. This is not just a question of hygiene, this is a sign of respect for people and for the space in which you are. The Japanese separate the street, which is considered dirty and external, from a pure, well-groomed inner world of a house or a traditional rodcan. This border must be respected and never crossed in street shoes. Particular attention is paid to this in private houses, restaurants, some museums, as well as in almost all traditional hotels. On the threshold there is usually a special ledge or staircase. This is a bright sign that it is here that you need to leave your shoes and go to the inner world in home slippers. By the way, slippers are often issued at the entrance, and they are used only in the room. If there are no slippers, it is customary to walk in socks. It is considered to be a barefoot is not considered very decent, especially if the floor is covered with tatami or carpet. The rules are quite clear. At the entrance there is always a separate zone, gonkan, where street shoes are left. After that, they put slippers or clean socks. In some cases, even special slippers are provided for the toilet, which cannot be taken out of this room. It is very important not to confuse the shoes and not to forget to change the slippers, otherwise it will be perceived as a sign of an impolite guest or just a distracted foreigner. In public institutions, for example, in traditional restaurants, medical clinics, temples, there is also often a zone for retraining. In addition, if you visit the temple or rodin, never advance street shoes on tatami. The Japanese remember such a mistake for a long time, and even the most polite owners will remain unsatisfied with your visit. At first glance, these traditions may seem excessive, but if you look closely, they make their stay in the Japanese house incredibly comfortable and allow everyone to feel like a special guest. Having taken this little step, taking off your shoes on the threshold, you show your respect for Japanese culture and to the people who invited you to your world. Chapter 5. Smells and personal hygiene in transport. When you first get into the Japanese metro or intercity train, you immediately notice that the air here is not only clean, but also deprived of all sorts of extra smells. In Japan, they are extremely serious about the issue of personal hygiene and smells in public places, especially in transport. Everyone is striving to not violate the boundaries of the comfort of others with either the appearance, nor with some smells, or even behavior. The Japanese pay a lot of attention to hygiene of the body and clothing. Almost everyone uses special antiperspirants, wears just washed things and ensures that there are no traces of sweat even in the very heat. It is customary to change clothes every day, otherwise it will immediately notice colleagues or fellow travelers, and a remark, even if not expressed aloud, can become the subject of awkwardness for the Japanese. There are no aromatic perfumes or pungent odors from food in trains. If someone accidentally brings 2 aromatic products, the staff will definitely be interested in this. In rooms where many people gather, there is an unspoken rule, to do everything so as not to interfere with others. Even such trifles as a carelessly launched shirt can be perceived as a sign of impolite or disrespect. If someone sneezes sharply, he will definitely cover his mouth and nose. If he coughs, put on a medical mask. The mask has become a daily part of life long before the appearance of medical requirements. This is a sign of care for health and respect for others, so as not to expose them to possible inconvenience. Even the tourist, if the aroma of perfume comes from him, to which the Japanese are allergic or who is unpleasant for someone, the reaction will be very restrained, but with a hint of discomfort. Loud smells are considered almost the same violation of order as loud sounds. Therefore, the Japanese carefully choose care products, prefer neutral aromas, do not tolerate strong smells of garlic, alcohol, or tobacco in transport. It is very interesting that even on the street it is not customary to eat on the go and reveal any ready-made dishes with a pungent smell. For this, there are special areas where people are not afraid to arrange a small snack with each other. Such a level of attention to purity and smells is made not for the sake of severity or pedantry, but so that every person, whether it is a local resident or guest, was truly calm and pleasant to be next to others. From the first days in Japan, you feel how concern for personal hygiene becomes part of a large respectful space, where someone else's comfort is as important as your own. Chapter 6. Photography of people and temples, invisible boundaries of personal space. In the era of social networks and convenient cameras, each tourist is drawn to take as many pictures as possible of temples, city streets, unusual faces. However, in Japan, photography is much more careful than in many other countries. Here, the concept of personal space covers not only physical, but also digital safety. Before you get the camera, it is important to remember the first and main rule: never photograph people without their permission. The Japanese really value privacy, and for them a random picture, especially if a person recognizes in the photo, is a real invasion. Even if someone seems to you a colorful character, it is better to come first and tactfully ask for permission. A polite bow and phrase in English or Japanese are understandable. The Japanese in such cases usually smile and respond with consent or gently refuse if they do not want to get into the frame. Their answer should always be respected. Particularly strict rules apply in temples and religious places. These are sacred spaces. It is not only forbidden to make noise here, photography is often also under the strict prohibition. Each temple has signs with designations, a cross through a camera, or the inscription "photos prohibited" in English and Japanese. And even if there are no such tablets, it is customary to show maximum caution, especially during rituals and prayers. Sometimes the staff will say special thanks for your respect. In some cases, it is allowed to remove the architecture of temples or gardens, but it is strictly impossible to approach with a camera to praying. Sometimes even statues or interior decorations are under special protection, because photography is considered an invasion of the spiritual world of the object of worship. In Japan's museums, it is also forbidden to photograph some exhibits, and for trying to secretly take a picture you can get a remark or a request to delete a photo right in front of the staff. A separate topic is street shots. On the lively streets of Tokyo, Kyoto, or Osaka, it is better to refrain from shooting close-ups of passers-by. Even a stranger in the background can consider himself a victim of invasion of personal life, and such situations cause noticeable discomfort among local residents. Often, if you really want to capture the scene from life or a beautiful city landscape, it is better to choose the angle so that people do not fall into the frame, or at least faces are unrecognizable. This approach will not only feel like a tactful guest, but also earn the respect of the locals. Violation of these unspoken rules can turn into not just a remark. For the Japanese, a violation of the personal border in photo without demand is perceived very acutely, and the place where the incident occurred will forever be associated with your non-watering act. The correct and respectful attitude to the photograph will not only protect from misunderstanding, but will also reveal for the traveler the opportunity to feel how in Japan they respect the inviolability of private life and the culture of the defense of personal space at the highest level. Chapter 7. Unacceptable behavior with sticks for food. In Japan, eating is not just a way to get enough, but a whole ritual with many rules that cannot be violated, especially when it comes to food sticks. For the Japanese, sticks are the same important cultural symbol as a tea ceremony or ikebana. The way you use them will talk about your respect for traditions and people at the table. One of the most stringent prohibitions, never stick the sticks vertically in figures. Such a gesture will immediately cause the Japanese anxiety, because it resembles mourning rites. This is how the sticks and rice on the altar are put in memory of the departed. Such a mistake is instantly striking and perceived as very rough and disrespectful. The second important taboo: do not pass food from sticks to sticks. It would seem that it is convenient if you want to share a tidbit, but for the Japanese this gesture is also associated with religious rituals, when bones with special sticks are transmitted in the process of farewell to the departed. In everyday life, this gesture is taboo. Instead, you need to put a piece on a neighbor's plate or use a special dishes for transmission. Do not use sticks as a pointer or a tool for gestures. Do not brand them, do not direct the tips of the sticks on a person at the table, and all the more do not poke them into food with a noise. The sticks are brought to the mouth neatly and without sudden movements, and between the bites they are usually placed on a special stand, hasioki, so that they do not touch the surface of the table. If you have reached your dish, never put the sticks crossly. This is another sign that is perceived as something unfavorable. It is better to put them in parallel and accurately. It is very important to remember that licking the sticks, picking them in food, moving the dishes on the table or holding them in their teeth, all this is perceived extremely unculturally. They may even make a remark if such errors are repeated several times in a row. For the Japanese, these little things are so natural that they practically do not notice them in everyday life, but they will immediately see them if the tourist does not do the same. The respectful attitude to the sticks for food is respect for the culture of eating, gratitude to the owners, and the desire to be here, even for one day. If you master these rules, then at the same table with the Japanese you will feel that they have become part of the real and very ancient tradition. Chapter 8. Smoking in public places, taboo, fines and special zones. In Japan, the attitude to smoking in public places is as strict and thoughtful as possible so that no one suffers from unpleasant odors or passive smoking. Many tourists are initially surprised. In the streets, in the yards, in parks, and even on the beaches there are no familiar ashtrays, and it is almost impossible to find a person with a cigarette on the go. All because Japan has stiff restrictions that are observed almost without exception. The first thing you pay attention to is for smoking there are special zones indicated by bright pointers. Usually these are small fenced sites with hood and separate cigarette trains. Such places can be found near the stations, shopping centers or office buildings, and sometimes they are so invisible that a random passerby may not even notice them. Smoking outside such zones is a gross violation of public order. In public institutions, cafes, restaurants, stations, in office buildings, hotels, smoking is completely prohibited or allowed only in specially allocated rooms with powerful ventilation. Even in their homes, the Japanese often ask guests to refrain from smoking in the living room or on the balcony, so as not to disturb their neighbors. A special Japanese sense of tact and care is associated with this. On the streets of Japanese cities, you can notice special signs and markings. You cannot smoke on the sidewalk, in line, near the stop or in a crowded place. The violating faces a solid fine that can reach several thousand yen. It is very important. If you smoke where it is forbidden, local residents are likely to pay attention to this and can cause the police or make a soft but very persistent remark. The Japanese's special attitude towards smoking is connected not only with care of health, the purity and comfort of each person is valued here. Cozy shops are installed in places for smoking, sometimes even TVs, so that a person can calmly spend time without interfering with others. In some areas of the largest cities, smoking outdoors under a strict ban at any time of the day. Smoking in Japanese trains, metro, taxi and plates are also completely prohibited. Even if the car seems empty, smoking can follow an impressive fine and reprimand from staff. A guest or in the Japanese house should always ask permission before smoking, and if the owner does not answer immediately or leaves the answer, consider this a refusal. This approach makes Japanese cities incredibly clean and convenient for everyone, creating a space where the personal comfort of each is put at the forefront. For a traveler, these rules mean, if you smoke, plan your route in such a way as to know the location of special zones and be prepared for smoking in the old-fashioned way on the street or on the balcony definitely will not work here. Chapter 9. Errors when visiting the onsen, Japanese public baths. Onsen is not just a place for swimming, but a real cultural ritual, which goes through its roots in ancient times. A visit to the onsen is a separate layer of Japanese life, and the rules of behavior here are so important that their violation is guaranteed to cause surprise or even indignation of others. The first thing that will surprise every foreigner is mandatory purity. Before entering a common font, you need to thoroughly wash yourself with soap, sitting on a special stool at a small shower. Wash standing or entering the water without rinsing from shampoo and soap is categorically impossible. Only when you are completely clean, you can sink into the warm water of the mineral source. The non-compliance with this ritual is perceived as disrespect for everyone who is already using onsen. A separate and very common taboo is tattoos. In Japanese culture, since ancient times, tattoos were associated with representatives of criminal groups. In most onsens, people with tattooed parts of the body can refuse the entrance or offer special stickers to mask the drawings. If you go to the hall with open tattoos, this is guaranteed to cause alertness or even a request to leave the institution. Only in a small number of tourist onsenas are related to this calmly, but most requires complete loyalty to tradition. Another important nuance is the behavior inside the font. A cap, a towel or any personal belongings should not fall into the water. The Japanese leave a small towel on the side of the pool or put on their heads, but in no case do not bathe it with them. Long hair is collected in a neat bundle so as not to pollute the water. As for the clothes, in the onsens, both male and female baths are classically separate, and bathe completely naked. The use of bathing suits in most establishments is prohibited. Even if you are embarrassed, no one will pay excess attention. In Japan it is perceived as part of hygiene, and not as an occasion to evaluate someone. It is allowed to talk quietly so as not to interfere with the rest of other guests. Raising the noise, loud laughter, splashing water, or jumping are considered uncultured and completely inappropriate. To photograph indoors is prohibited in all onsenins. This is an important element of respect for the personal space of vacationers. If you came with long hair, be sure to remove them so that no hair remains in the water. After bathing, you must be wiped dry in the locker room before going out into the common room, otherwise wet traces will remain on the floor and this will be perceived as a manifestation of iniquity. And if you are not sure of any rules, it is always useful to observe the locals. The Japanese are very tactful and always show how to behave with their behavior. Respecting these traditions, you will receive not only a charge of vigor and pleasure, but also deserve a grateful attitude from the inhabitants of Japan. The chapter is 10th. An erroneous friendliness, physical contact, hugs and handshakes. In Japan, the expression of friendliness and sympathy is manifested in a completely different way than in many countries of the world. If in Western cultures people often welcome each other with hugs, handshake or even patting on the shoulder, then for the Japanese touching is a very intimate topic. Even between good friends, friendly hugs are quite rare, and even more so inappropriate in relations with unfamiliar people or colleagues. The first thing that catches the eye of the traveler, at a meeting, the Japanese are in no hurry to rush into the arms and do not hold out their hands for handshake. Instead, they greet each other a slight bow, not approaching too close to the interlocutor. Pollen is a universal sign of respect that demonstrates attention and good intentions. The depth and duration of the bow depend on the situation. The more formal or important it is, the more deep the bow should be. Japanese culture of bodily is unusually restrained. Even with a family or among close friends, a distance is felt, and conversations are carried out calmly, without stormy gestures and vivid manifestations of emotions. This feature protects the personal space of everyone, because this is the only way to maintain harmony and avoid awkward situations. If you find yourself too intrusive or come to a person too close, This can cause a clear embarrassment or even irritation in the interlocutor. The distance in physical contact is too close, a real signal of impaired etiquette, which the Japanese consider to be a monotone. It is interesting that even a handshake, the usual gesture of business etiquette in the West, is extremely rare here and only on the initiative of the Japanese himself. If the guest pulls the first hand, a local resident will continue to bow. It looks a little strange for someone who is not familiar with the culture of the country. An exception can be business meetings with foreigners, when the Japanese try to adapt to the habits of guests, but even in such situations, handshake often accompany a slight bow. In an informal setting, for example, during holidays or meetings with children, physical manifestations of friendship also remain minimal. Children can hug parents or close relatives, but this gesture rarely goes into adults. It is very important for tourists to remember, if you want to leave a good impression about yourself, express joy and friendliness with words, a slight smile, a respectful bow and sincere interest. This will be enough. Even if friendship quickly arose between you and the Japanese, you should not proceed to a friendly hug or friendly patting on the shoulder. Such respect for personal space will not only show your awareness of traditions, but also help to start strong and harmonious relations with the residents of the country. The chapter is the 11th. Public expression of emotions. Why is it better to leave passion at home? In Japan, the manifestation of emotions in public has always been surrounded by a halo of restraint and special respect for others. The Japanese are convinced that the harmony of society is built on quiet joys and personal experiences, which should not become the property of all around. Even very joyful events or strong excitement is not customary to show openly here so as not to cause discomfort in others. The first bright rule is kisses and hugs on the street, in transport, or in any public place not only not encouraged, but can cause passers-by a sense of awkwardness or even irritation. The couples in love that in Europe or South America could hold hands or hug in front of everyone, in Japan they show feelings modestly, the maximum that will allow themselves. This is a rare touch or a short gesture of care. Even the spouses try not to demonstrate their relations to outsiders. Not only love, but also other emotions, such as joy, grief or anger, express in a controlled form. The Japanese do not scream, do not quarrel in public, do not laugh excessively loudly. If there is extreme joy or great news, it is discussed quietly, and sometimes they even transfer the conversation to a secluded place. Crying in public is also not accepted, even if there was some kind of personal trouble. This tradition allows you to maintain a sense of comfort for everyone who is nearby. For example, if someone laughs loudly or expresses irritation, others feel uncomfortable. After all, inside the Japanese public space, everyone, even strangers, is responsible for the atmosphere around him. When everything is quiet, no one stands out. It shows that everyone respects each other and support harmony. Interestingly, at school, children learn to control their emotions from the earliest years. Even participating in competitions or holidays, they most often express their delight moderately, without spinning emotions to the outside too clearly. Of course, in the family circle they can afford much more freedom, but still control the manifestations of feelings on the street or in transport. Many foreigners are initially surprised at this invisible silence of Japanese streets or metro station. But they gradually understand that such norms create a very comfortable atmosphere for everyone. No one interferes with their other personal manifestations. If you want to share joy or be upset, this can be done in a narrow circle or at home, but on the streets it is better to restrain yourself and learn a small, but very expressive gestures, a sincere smile, an easy bow, a warm look. That is how in Japan they express real interest and concern for others, without violating anything and without causing stress. The chapter is the 12th. Garbage and sorting of waste, rules that will surprise even Europeans. Once in Japan, the first thing that catches the eye of an attentive traveler is an almost complete absence of garbage on the streets. In large cities, especially in Tokyo and Kyoto, you can pass several quarters without finding a single urn. At first glance, this seems strange, especially for foreign guests from cities where garbage is located at every step. However, the Japanese have their own very good reasons and a rich culture of waste behavior. In Japan, it is customary to take garbage with yourself, not only after a picnic in a park or walking around the city, but even after eating a drink on the go. The residents of the country are careful about the purity of public spaces, and every Japanese study from an early age, if you brought a drink or a snack to the street, Your debt is to take the packaging home or to the nearest supermarket, where special urns are located. Sorting of waste is a real science. Garbage is divided into at least 3 categories: burned waste, non-liquid waste, and processed materials. In some cities, sorting is even more complicated. Individual containers are designed for plastic, aluminum, glass, and even type of food waste. Each resident is obliged to understand the intricacies of local instructions, otherwise their garbage may simply not be taken away. Sometimes special notes are even glued to packages indicating the error in sorting, and the owner has to study in his own misses. The places where the garbage can still be thrown away are metro stations, large shopping centers, or waiting rooms at stations. There, the urns are also divided into sections, and the wrong departure of the wrong container is considered an extremely impolite act. Tourists should be especially attentive to this. If you are not sure where to throw, for example, a plastic cover from a drink, it is better to ask the service staff or take it with you. Another Japanese feature: you will not meet people who eat hot food on the move or chewing a sandwich in transport. Eating on the street, like spreading the wrapping, is perceived as bad behavior. All that you ate or drank outside the cafe need to be carefully folded into a bag and conveyed to the house or place with a suitable urn. Even at sales, festivals, or during mass events, when the territory is filled with people and street merchants, supervisively monitors, a special brigade cleanses the territory every minute, and the guests patiently take away the waste with them. This approach forms in Japan a strikingly clean, almost sterile urban environment. Here no one stumbles on packs of chips, empty bottles, or the remains of a picnic in the park. Cultures of separate collection and disposal of waste are held by residents of all ages, and pride in the purity of the city is considered one of the foundations of public well-being. If you want to be in Japan on your wave, always carry a small plastic bag for garbage with you and do not hesitate to ask the locals where to throw one or another thing. This behavior will not only save you from awkward situations, but will also allow you to feel like a part of the country from the first day, where care for purity is not only a rule, but also respect for each person he met. Chapter 13. Import and export of prohibited goods, unexpected traps for tourists. Before a trip to Japan, it is worth carefully studying the rules regarding the import and export of different goods, otherwise even the most experienced traveler can fall into an unpleasant situation at the airport. In this country, there are many strictly regulated restrictions, and Japanese customs services are approaching the issue with great seriousness, taking care of the safety of public health and morality. First, you should find out about food. In Japan, the import of raw and raw products of animal origin is prohibited: meat, sausages, cheese, dairy products, as well as fresh fruits and vegetables. This is due to a very attentive attitude to sanitation and the fight against the importation of pests and diseases. If you have a sandwich or packaging of sausage in your suitcase, customs officers can remove them without the possibility of a return and even warn about the future control. The next taboo is medicine. Even such familiar drugs as some painkillers, anti-allergic drugs, or medicines for colds can be prohibited or allowed only in limited quantities. In Japan, strict control over the content of pseudoephedrine and other active substances in the drugs is noted, so it is better to get a list of permitted medicines in advance, usually on the website of the Japanese consulate. Particular attention is paid to tobacco products and alcohol. Japanese laws strictly limit the amount of cigarettes and alcohol, which can be transported across the border. For example, an adult is allowed to import 1 bottle of a strong drink and 2 packs of cigarettes, and not a single one more without special declaration and payment of duties. Everything that exceeds the limit must be declared in advance in the declaration. We must not forget about souvenirs. If you plan to take the products from wildlife, bones or fur of rare animals from Japan, as well as ancient artifacts, stones, or products with cultural value, be extremely careful. Such things are sometimes forbidden to export, regardless of the reason for the acquisition. Japanese services also carefully monitor literature, images, and arts, if they can be regarded as not complies with the country's moral standards. Any items, even if in your culture they are absolutely harmless, can cause delay or interrogation. It is important to remember that in any dubious situation, the Japanese act according to the law, and requests to resolve in a friendly manner never work here. If a controversial situation arises, everything is decided by the employee on the border, and his word is the last. Tourists are recommended to familiarize themselves with all the customs restrictions of Japan in advance so that the rest is not overshadowed by unpleasant surprises. It is better to refuse the superfluous on the border in advance, because if you accidentally violate the rules, you will have to say goodbye to the thing, and sometimes get a strict warning or a fine. This approach will protect you from unnecessary troubles and make you feel the desired and respected guest in the country of strict, but honest rules. Chapter 14. Loud speech and violations of public peace. In Japan, concern for the comfort of other people was elevated to a rank of national nature, and this is especially manifested in public places. One of the most important rules is not to create unnecessary noise, not to speak loudly, do not laugh throughout the street, not listen to music without headphones, and not behave defiantly. The Japanese are convinced the public is a territory where everyone is responsible not only for himself, but also for the peace of others. First of all, it is noticeable in transport. As soon as you go to the metro, car or train, you feel amazing silence. Nobody talks on the phone, does not discuss the news in high colors, and communication between people, if it happens, is very quiet and restrained. Even if a large company travels, its representatives try not to stand out and not interfere with the silence, accompanying the conversations with a half-whisper. They listen to music exclusively in headphones, and at minimal volume so that no one around is heard. Everyday discipline is manifested in lines. People become one after another evenly, do not push and do not try to crawl forward. Any manifestation of haste or attempt to break the order is surprising and, at least, the cold look of others. Even the youngest passengers or schoolchildren in front of turnstiles behave calmly and respectfully. A similar picture is characteristic of most large cities, where millions of people are held at the metro stations daily, but even with such workload there remains almost absolute silence. Truly strict norms concern priority places. In each car, a number of seats are allocated for older people, passengers with children, disabled people, or pregnant women. If a person accidentally sat in this place and does not belong to one of these categories, they expect him to give in to the seat if necessary, or will not take it at all. It is especially important, do not even stand next to such places and do not use the phone there. The thing is that the electromagnetic waves of the phone can interfere with the work of medical devices such as pacemakers, as well as create an anxiety element for people with chronic diseases. The culture of discipline is not only for transport. Loud screams, disputes, emotional skirmishes or aggressive gestures both on the street and in institutions cause an immediate reaction from others. Even if it seems to you that the situation requires an increase in voice or active gestures, it is better to change the intonation to the soft and explain everything in a calm voice. In street cafes, parks, shops, and even at crowded intersections, the Japanese try to speak so that the neighbor almost does not hear their conversations. Parties and holidays, of course, are held noisily, but only in specially designated places and watches. Outside of these zones, the main thing is that in no case do not interfere with others. This approach to calm allows you to create an atmosphere of trust and respect, where everyone feels like a part of a large, well-functioning mechanism. For a tourist, this is a useful and desired skill. After all, having mastered the art of silence, you can become much faster to become your own in the eyes of even the most restrained Japanese. Chapter 15. Violation of the private territory, personal space of the Japanese. In Japan, the attitude to the personal territory and the boundaries of others are built with extraordinary respect and frugality. For the Japanese, personal space is an invisible protective circle, the violation of which is unacceptable under any circumstances, especially in everyday life, in transport, and on the streets of large cities. Violation of this balance is perceived acutely, and sometimes causes this shock or resentment. First of all, this is manifested in the simplest things. When entering the train or the subway, no one will sharply squeeze out between other passengers, will not push, climb in the middle of the line or stand up for other people's things without extreme necessity. Even with a big hurry, the Japanese patiently wait for their turn. If you have a small queue, everyone will stand at a distance, excluding any attempts to get too close. In the escalators, everyone quickly takes its place and tries to fulfill the unspoken rule: stand on one side so as not to interfere with those who are in a hurry. Usually in Tokyo they stand on the left, and in Osaka, on the right. An indicator of a high level of culture is the ability not only not to affect someone else's territory, but not even to create a hint of it. For example, it is customary to carefully hold their bags and backpacks so as not to touch other passengers, but when sitting on a bench or in a carriage, to be located so that it is not accidentally in touch with elbows or shoulders with neighbors. Even a conversation is carried out either by a whisper or at a minimum distance, so as not to drag others into a personal dialogue. Particular attention is paid to priority places. This is not only about respect for older people or passengers with children, but also about delicacy in contacting everyone who may need support. If you occupy a priority place, it is expected that you will yield it without words and waiting for gratitude, otherwise your act will remain in the memory of others. In no case should you obscure the output or passage, speak loudly or actively gesticulating at the entrance. In the subway wagons and trains, men strictly avoid getting into women's wagons at certain hours allocated by signs on the platforms. Such an alien in the car quickly evokes a cold look and will often hear a restrained, but unequivocal remark. A separate story is views and observation of others. In Japan, it is impolite to closely look at others, express amazement or curiosity in open. Any intrusive look can be perceived almost as an invasion. The same applies to photographing. Discussion allowed the appearance or habits of a person. Respecting these unspoken laws, the traveler will quickly feel how the harmony of space works for everyone: less fuss, less conflicts, people live and move even more comfortably in the most densely populated metropolis. Such norms create an atmosphere of well-being, security and inner peace, and if you want to integrate into Japanese society, it is most often enough to just try to not interfere with others. Chapter 16. Superstitions and social taboos, numbers, gifts, and symbols. In Japan, the high-tech modernity and deeply rooted ancient traditions and superstitions are surprisingly harmonious. Here, many everyday attachments are still subordinate not only to the laws of politeness, but also by a very peculiar, sometimes inexplicable prohibitions and social taboos. Even if you are a skeptic in life, faced with them personally, you begin to treat these details much more carefully. One of the most noticeable superstitions is a special attitude to certain numbers. For example, the number 4 is considered unhappy, since in Japanese it sounds like the word end of life. For this reason, most Japanese avoids 4 of any objects in one gift, and in hospitals and hotels there is often no 4th floor or room with this figure. According to the same logic, the number 9 also carries a negative coloring, since its pronunciation is like a word meaning suffering. Therefore, in elevators you can find the absent 4th and 9th floors, and a tourist is not recommended to give objects in the amount of 4 or 9. The culture of gifts in Japan is a whole art filled with meaning and caution. For example, the Japanese never give knives, scissors or any sharp objects to ordinary acquaintances. This can be considered as a break in a relationship. A gift from a pair of slippers or towels, if it is given a married couple, can hint at the plans to separate them. It is very important. White flowers, especially camellia, are considered a symbol of farewell, and it is not customary to bring them to visit, especially if these are not close relatives. It is extremely impolite to give scarves. This item is associated with the image of parting and sadness. You can't forget about red envelopes. In Japan, money for festive and joyful events is traditionally awarded in beautifully decorated white or decorative envelopes. But the red envelope is associated with farewell, so it is considered a big mistake to make such a package for a wedding or birthday. There are still many less obvious superstitions. For example, sticks for food cannot be sticking vertically into rice or leaving them crossed on the table. This is directly related to farewell rituals. Giving mirrors and combs is also considered a bad sign. The mirror is associated with separation, and the comb with its sound with the end in suffering. Seasonal symbols play an important role. For example, in January, the Japanese try not to cut their nails at night. It is believed that this may deprive good luck, and in the fall it is worth being especially attentive when choosing gifts. Any hint of constancy or completion is considered a foreshadow of the end of the relationship. It is very useful for travelers to learn in advance about these details. Even if it seems to you that ancient beliefs have lost meaning, in the eyes of the Japanese, rude neglect of such nuances will spoil the impression for a long time. But subtle politeness, respect for symbols and the rejection of ill-conceived gifts is the best way to cause sympathy when communicating and avoid awkward situations. The Japanese value a sincere interest in their traditions and will be happy to talk about other unusual signs if you show respect for their cultural subtleties. Chapter 17. Conclusion: why respect for the rules is the key to an unforgettable journey. Summing up our big journey according to Japanese rules and taboos, it is impossible not to admire how the life of this country is carefully built. Here, literally every detail of everyday life, from behavior in the subway to choosing a gift for a gift, stores a deep meaning and is based on the idea of respect, to a person, to traditions, to nature, to space, and even silence. If you look closely, these rules are not an empty formality, but a thin setup on the harmonious coexistence of millions of different people. Respect is a thread that connects generations, sows everyday life and makes Japan a uniquely cozy and honest in every detail. It is important for the Japanese that not a single action creates inconvenience or unpleasant emotions to another person, especially when it comes to guests of the country. Even an inconspicuous violation of the taboo, such as loud speech or by chance not their thrown out garbage, is not perceived as shallow prank, but as a signal of impolitude and disrespect for the whole society. But the real beauty of Japanese culture is that foreigners showing sincere respect are happy everywhere. It is not necessary to know all the nuances, it is enough to be careful, interested, ask and try not to interfere with others. Each bow, every restrained gesture, each neatly brought a gift or properly cleaned shoes in the house are perceived as a manifestation of empathy and openness. In Japanese culture, the response to kindness and a gift is a sacred part of communication, whether it be uvai, prison, or seasonal souvenirs. They give gifts not only for special occasions, but also just for expressing gratitude, respect, or for memory. Even if you do something for the first time, try to be sincere, and the locals will definitely support you, explain, help and forgive small mistakes. Knowledge of these rules turns a campaign along the streets of Tokyo, Kyoto, Sapporo, or Osaka from simple tourism into a deep acquaintance with an amazing country. Here, everyone feels like a part of a large mechanism, and respect for others returns the story in the form of warmth, politeness, and real friendship. Let your journey through Japan be not just a list of sights, but the experience of real empathy. After all, the real power of this country is hidden in the ability to respect another. Do not forget about the useful services that we indicate in the fixed comments. Subscribe to the channel, like it. Good rest for everyone.